Good morning, everybody. My name is Steven van den Broeke, and I'm the local coordinator for the Roof Network in Ghent. And I'd like to welcome you from my side to the Roof Network, to the Roof Winter School. And it's still winter, and that's a good time for capturing knowledge and to reflect. And that's what we will do today. And after today, spring will be there, and that's a perfect time for putting that knowledge into practice. So this is the whole point of this winter school. It is to give you the knowledge that enables you to act in your local context. And it is our mission to enable you to realize housing first and to end homelessness across Europe. So in this session today, we will look at housing first support. The first hour will give us some insights in the theory of it. And the question here is, how should support be organized in housing first? In the second hour and a half, we will look at the practice. We will look at 3 city cases, Ghent, Glasgow, Toulouse Métropole. And there we will see how this theory of housing first support can be realized in different local contexts. We believe that you can learn from the translation from theory to different real-life cases on housing first support, and that's actually what we will be presenting you now. So we will now have the theory for half an hour with then 10 minutes of Q&A. And then afterwards, there will be more room for discussion. If you have questions during class, please write them in the chat and we will be picking them up during the Q&A session. Leaves me only to present our first speaker, and that is Peter-Jan Heylenbosch. He is one of the very dedicated housing first support workers in Ghent, and he is also trained as a housing first teacher in different train-the-trainer sessions across Europe. So Peter-Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm waiting for the PowerPoint presentation to come on. So I'm Peter-Jan. I work for 10 to 12 years with people who suffer homelessness. And like 5 or 6 years into the Housing First project in Belgium. What we're gonna do in the next half an hour, I'm gonna do my best to tell everything in half an hour. Won't be easy. We can go to the agenda first in the next slide. One more. Yes, so first I will be telling a little bit about what is housing first, and I'll go through the principles. What is the difference between housing first and housing led? When are we speaking about housing led and not housing first anymore? And when we are not speaking about housing led at all? Then we'll focus a little bit on the housing first support and different support models in the kind of team compilation you can have there. And to end, I will add some stational support elements that I think personally are very important in the support for housing first. Next slide, please. Yes, one more. So what is housing first? Housing first, as most of us know, started in New York by Sam Barris, who saw there were a lot of people suffering complex problems, suffering drug abuse, psychiatric illnesses. And you had a step model where everybody had to be trained to go live in a house. And he turned it around and he went for fast entrance to permanent housing for homeless people with significant complex problems. They were always returning. We see that too in our own context. You have those homeless people suffering and going from shelter in and out. They get evicted, they go back to shelter. And he turned it around and he said, we go for regular housing with a regular contract and housing as a first step. So housing can provide a safer environment for the clients to enable treatment. This within an unconditional support. So if treatment fails, it doesn't have to end the housing contract. Something I tell my clients too. They get direct entrance in regular housing. And if they abide the rules of the housing company, of society, they don't have to let me in. It's not because they don't let me in, they cannot live in their house. And Samson Barris poured that into 8 principles. I will go through the 8 principles with you. That's the next slide, please. Thank you. So first of all, housing is a human right. It's kind of the vision of housing first, that it doesn't matter who you are, what you're suffering from. Housing is a human right, and everybody should have that right and be able to use that right for housing. The second principle, the choice and control for the service user, is there because well, everybody thinks that's important. If we look to ourselves, we always know better for ourselves, and we are kind of like the specialist in our own situation. And it is not different for people suffering homelessness or suffering mental illness or addiction. They are kind of the specialists of their situation, and we are there to support them to make their own choice and control, and empower the people in their choice and control. That's very important, so people can learn what are good choices, bad choices, and take their own responsibilities. This is very important to enable the learning process from somebody. The third principle, the separation of housing and treatment, very important. Also very important to take away pressure with people and enable their help and a trajectory they can make, so they don't have to be afraid of losing the house if they don't let them help with the drug abuse or with the mental illness. It's a certainty, and that creates a very safe and peace environment, so everybody can start from their home without living in the constant fear of losing it when they are not succeeding in a process. Then the next 2 principles are kind of methods in which you need to work within housing first. Is a recovery orientation and the harm reduction. Recovery orientation is very important because we have to see our clients or people more than just their illness or their addiction. You cannot organize recovery within a vacuum. There's not enough time, but I can advise to check a movie on YouTube from Patricia Deegan. She explains it very nice and good what recovery orientation is and what it meant for her. She uses a sentence that we have to help people recover and not make them good pill swallowers. And I think it's very nice said, and you have to pay attention that every person is more than just his disease or his addiction. It can be a father, he's a mother, can be a sportman, and then we have to work with all those things, not in a vacuum, to help people recover for the situation. And it's a focus that's very important, I think. Next to that, the method of harm reduction. It's classic method with people who suffer drug addiction. Excuse me. With people who suffer drug addiction. And the main thing about this is that we don't strive for absence. It fits within the choice and the control for the service user. If somebody wants to keep using, it's his choice and control, and he will, feel benefits about it, but he will also suffer a negative outcome from that. But it's important that we focus on not willing him to stop using, but that we try to control the damage of it for himself on different levels, for himself, for society, but also for his close social context. We all know a few examples of this. Harm reduction, like the seatbelt, is a very classical harm reduction method. We don't take all the cars from the highway. we get everybody seatbelts. So the damage is a little bit more controlled when there's an accident. And it's the same with our clients, providing clean needles, helping them to service us, providing needle boxes so the cleaning lady won't have an accident with the needles. But also for society, it's good to work harm reduction, so people don't weigh on the system, on the mental health system, and it will be more cost effective, I think. Then the active engagement without coercion. I think that's very important for the unconditionality that that we see in Housing First, to don't put pressure on our clients and then empower them and let them follow their own process. The example I always use is why the active engagement without coercion is important is we work with people who need a lot of chances, who don't have a lot of strength to carry all their problems, but a lot of times in society, I feel those people are the ones who get the least chances to make mistakes. And there we miss an important part of a learning process, I think. So the active engagement, it's important to have the right to make mistakes. When I be 3 times too late on my job, my boss will ask me how I'm doing. If a lot of us clients, the second time they are not on their appointment, they don't have to come back or they lose their money. And actually they need those chances more than we do. I have much more support context around me than a client. So that's why I believe the active engagement is very important. Then 7th, the person-centered planning. It covers a little bit the choice and control of the service user. They are the boss of their situation and everything goes around them. It's also important to take away the pressure. If an organization starts with, you can get help from us, but within 6 months, you have to do this or you have to do that, or otherwise we stop, or even we can only provide this for 6 months. That comes with the flexible support a little bit farther. Then we work from our organization and we tell them how to do that. In Housing First, we work with the client, what are their dreams, and then where do they want to get, and how do they want to do it. There are really the pros in their situation and we're there to support them. And we are not the professionals. We're the professionals, but we're not the ones who know what's best for them. We can just help them in the process, finding out what's best for them, I think. Last but not least then, the flexible support for as long as required. For me, also important to take away pressure from, a pressure of something people have to do. You can stay, we can stay as long as you want. Sometimes very intensive. After a few months, maybe, or years, it's possible we hear clients like once a month by telephone, and then they have a tough situation, and then it gets intense a little bit more again. And then we go back to once a month calling. But it's very important because the people are a little bit like laundry. You don't do the laundry, you put it in your closet and it never comes out. Things come out again. It's not that people, it's with us, it's too like that. You handle a problem in your life, it goes better, but things come back. So I believe that's why it's important to have a flexible support as long as needed, because then people won't let things get too big, so they are very hard to overcome. When somebody has a trust relationship with their support worker, the support worker knows the history of the people, knows their do's and their don'ts. It's much easier for a client, but when everything went well for 2-3 years and he suffers a throwback, then he will feel much more comfortable to tell somebody about it who knows him, who knows his process, who knows his trajectory, instead of going back to the general welfare, see a new person, see a new social assistant, have to tell again and again what happened in the past, what is do's, is don'ts. So that's why I believe the flexible support for as long as possible as required is very important. All right, these are the 8 principles from Housing First. Then the next slide will tell us a little bit more from Housing First and Housing Led. So we had the original Housing First model with its 8 principles, and people around the world start picking up, Canada, Europe, and it spreads, but you see that the local context always is different. Different target groups, not the money, not the housing, but always challenges that made it harder to hold on to the 8 principles of Housing First. And that's when we speak of housing led, when it's different in support, in durability of housing, and when there are conditions met to the housing. If there is said, okay, you can have a house, but you have to get help for your mental illness or your drug abuse, otherwise you lose the contract, that's housing led. When somebody can only choose to live in a house by 4, for example, group living, that's housing led. If the person in the Housing First trajectory would choose to live in a group housing, then it can be Housing First because it was his own choice. And when he has a choice, when he doesn't have the choice, we speak of housing led. Then in the next one, further down, we will see also when we can't speak anymore even about housing led. And what are the core principles in support. So the support models for Housing First and Housing Led. I have to watch time. I'm going to hurry a little bit. So the Housing First support, the housing is essential to start, of course, and the support as long as required. I talked about it with the principles, why I believe it's very important. What I think is also good need to know is that we don't always, we not only work with our clients, we work with our context and the network of the clients. And we have to keep it in mind always, because sometimes for me, it's even more hard to work with the context and the network, professional and client network, than with the client itself, because you have to convince a lot of people of why you are working in a different way, why you let people make their own choices, why you let people make mistakes. And not every service has a possibility because they have to finish a trajectory within 6 months. And then Housing First is the opposite of it. So a lot of the times you have to also listen to your colleagues, to your network, your professional network, and try to explain what you're doing and really get them with you into the Housing First story, communicate very good, explain why you do things. So Housing First for me is also in support. It gets easier when you work with a lot of contexts, like you work with your clients. But then the next slide, we see within Housing First, what are the core principle typology. This is according to from the Housing First, Johnson Barris. These 4 core principles we cannot let go of. So the separation of housing and support services is very important. The open-ended, flexible, and intense support, like I explained, is also one we cannot let go of. The harm reduction and the choice and control for the service user. These 4 we have to hang on to. If we're not doing that, you can not speak about Housing First or not speak about housing led, especially because it's like, how can I say it? It's kind of a philosophy inside it. The open-ended, flexible, empower people, and it takes a lot of time because you're supporting people in a learning process. You're not doing it for them, but in the long run, it will be much easier to let people go, stand on their own, and your support will get less intense because you give people control of their lives again. But a little remark there is that you have the 8 principles, and also like Samson-Berry says, the more you move away from that, the approach that may lessen the effectiveness of the housing first. It will be always better that you can provide the 8 principles, but as we said, in local context, it's possible you just have to walk a little bit away from them. Yes. Then that gets me with the models of support, the 2 teams. So you have assertive community treatments, and you have intensive case management. Those are the 2 models of support that are written down that Housing First team needs. The first one, assertive community treatment, is also the way it initially started with Samson-Berry's in New York. We speak about 1 team, and services are provided directly. It's 1 team with nurse, doctor, psychiatrist, social worker, supporting coach. They work in 1 team, they work together. The psychologist will do house visits, he will go to the supermarket with them, but you have a lot of know-how in 1 team. Most of the time, they advise this kind of support for the high intensity and high need clients. It's costly, it's a lower caseload. The caseload 5 to 10 is for 1 full-time, that they said, and most of the times it's 7 out of 7 days, 24 hours support. What a team like that includes, that's the next slide. I have to hurry a little bit. So an ACT team always has to include, according to the Housing First philosophy, a medical staff, peer support worker, social service broker. It may include housing support, basic skill trainers, training and labor specialists. But again, it will depend on every social context, local context. Yeah, the money there is to pay people. For example, our colleagues in Brussels, Infirmière de Rue, they work assertive community treatment, and they have like doctor, psychologist, housebroker, social worker, supporting coach, and job coach, I think, and nurse. Yes, so that's their ACT team. Then in Ghent, later on the day, I will talk about that too. The model of support we work is intensive case management. Here we have 1 case manager, and he's like the service broker, and he works with the client, and he uses everything in the local context to adjust and adapt to the needs and the questions of the client. We go look around in the city who can help, and then have a good communication with them. It's said that this is more effective for the medium intensive, medium need clients, or less cost, and it's less costly. So in some places, I also heard they work with both models, like in England, they really make the difference between, all right, this is a high need client, so he needs an ACT team, but they also have an intensive case management team where people can go over from that. Once the medium intensity is there, the medium needs are there, and these teams can have a higher caseload. Full-time can, they say, 15 to 25 people, but 25 I think really is a, yeah. It's how you say, how more is difficult. Most of the time, these models of support also don't provide the 24/7 crisis intervention, mostly just weekdays. Then the similarities between those 2, it's shown that it both rapidly ends homelessness, improves the quality of lives and the community functioning of the people. So it's not that the one or the other works better, they both do their thing. It depends for which group of clients you want to adjust and adapt to. There are a few differences, of course. The next slide is that. So the differences is the good thing with assertive ACT teams is a know-how from the different branches of care and welfare are in 1 team. With intensive case management, you depend on your local services. and you have to go look for it. If you want to get advice, you have to look where you can get that advice, and it's not inside your team. Also, if you have talks about cases, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to have the professional advice which you have in the ACT teams. There is a direct communication between the actors in the assistant process, and then especially with Housing First, I think that's important. Because sometimes it has to go fast, and then when you have to work over the different services, it's important, what I said in the beginning of the presentation, is that you invest in these communication, you invest in these cooperations. So you cover, as an intensive case management team, you can cover a little bit those direct communications. And we see that the more we work together with people, the more we explain what we do and understand how they work, the easier it becomes to have direct communication between different local services. Also, one good thing, I think, is a high intensity clients with high needs are worn by a team in this in the ACT teams. Sometimes it's very hard in intensive case management if you are confronted with people committing suicide, have a very hard and mental illness. It's much harder to carry it alone as a person in a one-on-one relationship than you have in ACT, where you have a lot of people, you can talk about it, you can think about it. I think that's a big difference. And of course, you have a larger client base possible with the intensive case management. All right, I have 3 minutes for support sessionals, and a little bit more maybe. The support sessionals is something I write down for myself. In my experience, I think the next 4 things are very important to keep in mind.
Peter,
yeah.
You have 8 more minutes.
8 more? Oh, okay. So, first of all, avoid different responsibilities or functions within one professional role. Later today, I explain how we work in Ghent. But as a Housing First supporter, I think it's very important that it's very clear for the client that you're always next to him. And you don't get pushed in the function of punishing, taking away money because you don't come to an appointment or there are too much complaints. So now I have to help you. But in the meantime, I also have to say, if you don't do this, this, and this, I have to evict you. So there's a conflict of role that's very important to avoid, because otherwise it becomes only harder and harder to sustain your personal, looking for my word, your personal relationship with the clients, the trust with the clients. And it's much easier to keep standing next to him. I don't make decisions, but I can help you with it. You don't have to leave the house for me. Let's see how we can fix this together. So it's very important, I think, to avoid this, the different responsibilities. The next one is a choice and control for service. Users saying there is silence of the care provider. That's something I see for myself, because I put responsibilities with clients. I let them make their own choices, good or bad. It doesn't matter. If they want to make a bad choice, I will tell them why I think it's a bad choice, but I'll let them make that choice. But it also makes it easier for me. When he makes a bad choice, I come responsible for it. I can help him, and I can overview the situation. How did it come? What can we do next time when it occurs? But I can be held responsible. In the other systems where social workers sometimes have to say, you have to do this, you have to do this. If that goes wrong, you carry a moral responsibility, which sometimes makes the job hard to deal with in your head when you get home. And this is very important, I think, to relieve stress with yourself or responsibility. The third, very important, the objective of Housing First is increase the well-being of the client. And sometimes that means letting him make his choices and make him feel better. It's not that we have to keep the house we have to strive for absence. No, we have to increase the well-being of the client. And that's very important, because I also believe the rest will grow from there. Yes. Then last one, and that's a gift, I think. The housing first worker is not a controller for social rules, for housing company rules. We are the supporters. So I will never be the person who says, if you do this, you have to leave your house. If you do this, you don't get any money anymore. I'll be the one listening together with him and ask him, what can we do? And that's very important that we know this from ourselves, because sometimes it's hard to let go. We're used to it, to think, okay, you cannot do that. So I tell you, you cannot do that. But actually, the client has a choice of not doing that. He cannot steal, but if he wants to make that choice, I can advise him not to. But if he makes it, it will be a learning process. And it's important that we are not the people who give him these rules, but we are the people to help him understand and use the process to, when he makes mistakes, to stay with him. And the next time we can say, all right, last time this and this happened. What are we going to do differently? What can I do differently? What can you do differently? So we avoid this situation if you want to avoid it. So that's why I think it's important. We have to be aware always that we are not the rule givers. We are the supporters. Yes. All right. This was in a nutshell. The support models of housing first and how why I believe in housing first. And now we can go to the questions. Thank you for your attention.
All right, thanks, Peter-Jan, for this session. I think we already have a good insight now in the basics on housing first support. If people still have questions on this session, you can still put them in the chat. We already have some questions, Peter-Jan, so I will start with the first one from Liat. How did you work in Ghent in coaching the social workers and adapting to the new methods?
It's something that it kind of was already 14 years ago when it started. We were lucky that the team leader then, the moment that the question was from the city, all right, we're gonna change it, and the support has to come from the public welfare, not from the housing company. Then my team leader then choose to go for the housing first methods. It's in 2014 that it became, how you say it? It became more
conscious.
Yeah, it became more conscious because we had the Housing First project in Belgium. We had the support from the government who said we're going to test this in different local contexts. And that was a moment that it was appealed as, this is Housing First that we do. These are the 8 principles. And yeah, just by giving it that official characteristic, we also, as professionals, had more attention for that, and we had to work like that. I went to do, I followed courses. I came back to my team in meetings, in communication. I have the awareness now from the 8 principles, and I try to project them on my team. And I think that's how we grew into being a housing first social workers, supporters.
I'm sorry, my connection is a bit unstable. You still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. All right, thanks, Peter-Jan. Do you always work one-on-one within your support, no. Or do you have some sort of a support group?
Yes, we have a sort of support group. We work intensive case management, but always in tandem with a social worker. So the roles between the finances, administration, and the role of support is separated from each other. But I'll tell a little bit more about it in the next session when I present Ghent.
Mm-hmm. would it be possible to tell us something about the relationship to the neighborhood? Do you contact neighbors? Do you prepare neighbors, for example, when people are housed? Or
preparing, no, personally not, because then for me it feels that it wouldn't be regular anymore, because you prepare somebody that is coming. You cannot know from the start that somebody who is homeless that they will make trouble. Then it would be possible you prepare your neighbor for a very kind and sweet person. When we go for the contract and stuff, when I see neighbors, I say hello, I talk a little bit to them. And when there are troubles, it depends on situation to situation. Sometimes it's so extreme, we contact a housing company. Sometimes we talk to the neighbors ourselves. Sometimes I ask the client, is it okay for me to give my number to the neighbors? Is there something that they can call me? You have neighbors who want that. You have neighbors who want to be left alone. So it depends on the context of the neighborhood very much.
all right. All right, there are coming some more questions. In Ghent, we are using the ICM system, not the ACT team. That's true?
Yeah, it's true, but because we work from...
a mix.
It's a little bit a mix because we always work in tandem with the social worker. And because of the Housing First is organized from the social department of the city, we actually have within our team also a psychologist, or we have a social worker for labor, for activation. And there are not in our team, but we are in direct communication with them. So it's a little bit of both, but much more ICM than assertive community treatment.
Yeah, the services for crisis intervention are not in the team, eh?
No, so for example.
Therefore, it's more ICM than ACT, I think.
Yeah, much more ICM, ACT.
Yeah.
And also we are lucky in Ghent, we have we have a lot of services we can contact, and it's a very, I believe it's a very good network with a lot of knowledge and then very motivated people.
Mm-hmm. All right. One more question. How many people are supported by the multidisciplinary team, and how many professionals are part of the team?
In Ghent?
I think that's aiming at the ACT team then, I guess.
How here in Ghent or in general?
I think generally. Dominic?
Can you repeat the question again, Steven? Sorry.
So how many people are supported by
Ghent, in Ghent.
I think it's about the caseload, actually.
Right, all right.
Sorry.
Our caseload is now around the 25 to 30. It depends. But it's a high caseload with us. Also because we have the 41 contracts every year who come in, and the support is as long as required or as wanted by the client. So the inflow is much bigger than the outflow. And that's one of our challenges in Ghent. How do we keep handling this and providing good supports when there are numbers of support, people need support are always increasing. But for the moment, it works pretty good, I think, to keep it around 25, sometimes 30.
Peter-Jan, if you, as a city, want to start up Housing First, would you prefer to start up with an ACT team or with an ICM team, or does it depend for you?
Me personally, ICM, because I work in ICM, and I haven't worked in an ACT team. And I like working with all the services in this around the city, and we're used to that. When I would work in an ACT team, now we're really used to using our environment, and then we would have a lot to learn, I think, on that base. But I especially think you have to. It depends on the local context. Is there enough money for that? From where is it organized? Like now, from us, it's public welfare organizes it. But if it's organized from a psychiatric clinic, for example, then they will have a psychiatric, they will have a nurse, they will have a doctor. So it's kind of logical to choose this way. I think it depends. But I like ICM and I like the one-on-one contact with the clients. It's very personal.
All right. Another question, are there different ways to support a woman or a man in Housing First?
Yeah, it's different in life, so it will be different in Housing First too, I think. Yes, but it's different to support everybody. Everybody needs a little bit different approach. Man, woman, straight, gay. It depends case to case. I think you have women where you had to be much less softer than with some other men. You have to be much more soft. It's too general to say, yes, you need a different approach. You have to be very attentive to the differences between men and women. But like you have to have attention for differences between how do I help youth and how do I help other elderly people. It will also be a different approach. I think the power in the Housing First is that they choose their way and it's client-centered. So you follow them and you support them and you will hear it from them, from the clients. I think it's good you mentioned that too. If there's something, let me know. We work on it together.
It's a related question. Do you have a specific different experiences when you support people from different cultures?
Yes. Also the same. The difficulty there is that that you have to be aware of it and not just look from your own glasses to society and inform yourself. For me personally, in those situations where I'm confronted with a culture I don't know or with, for example, people with psychosis also, it's also a different culture if we want to make it very wide. I always going to communicate with them, you know, that I don't know much about the culture, so please tell me if I'm doing something wrong, if I'm doing something good, if I have to have more attention for something else. I bring it in communication indirectly.
All right, thanks. I think we will have to wrap it up. There's still one more question from Matthijs, but I will park it to the next session because there we will specifically go into the city cases. So I think this question is more related specifically to the city of Ghent. So thanks, Peter-Jan, for this first session. I think now we will going to the break for 15 minutes, and afterwards we will come back with 3 city cases and have more time for discussion on specific housing support realizations. So thank you and see you in a minute.